Hello! So for some time now, people have been emailing me asking if I might record a beginner's guide to starting and configuring and flying the basic Airbus A320 that comes with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm going to go all the way through the procedure of configuring the aircraft from cold and dark for flight, and then taking it on a flight. We're going to fly it from Stansted Airport, just north of London, over to Dublin in Ireland. Okay, so where do we start? Well, first things first, in order to get the aircraft in a cold and dark state, you have to start your flight with it at a parking gate. Okay, so when you do that, the aircraft will start as we can see it right in front of us here, with covers on the engines and chocks on the wheels. So first things first, we need to go and fix that. So we're going to go and walk over towards the engines using the mouse and the keyboard, and then click on the cover on the engine. I'm going to go back over to the wheels and click on the chocks to remove them, and that's all we need to do. So this is the InnyBuilds developed A320 version 2, as it's known in the simulator. Okay, so when we're happy that we've done what we need to do, we can press Shift and C, and that puts us inside the cockpit. So I'm going to work through a checklist to get or not a checklist, a procedure to get the aircraft up and running. It's my own procedure that I've written myself that includes all of the keys and instructions of where to look and what to press. It's available from the internet. I'll put a link in the notes of this video, and I'll pin a comment with a link to it as well. But I'll give you a quick look at it. So if we go and look in a browser, this is the document. So if we scroll down through it, it gives you a good view of the camera control keys in the simulator. It also tells you how to set up custom views, because they're really helpful with this aeroplane. And then it goes through obviously doing the walk around, which we've just done. If you want to use Simbrief, you can, and I'm going to show you how to program the aircraft both with Simbrief and without it. Okay. So then if we carry on down, it goes then into pre-flight. So you can see it's telling you what keyboard keys to press, where to look, what to turn, what to flick, what to press, all the way down through. And you can see we're programming manually without Simbrief and programming with Simbrief. Okay. And then you've got, following that, getting the engines up and running and preparing for taxiing to the runway, and notes and reminders beyond that. So you can see it goes through everything you're going to need to know. Okay, so I have gone and filed a flight plan with Simbrief. I'm not going to cover that in this video. It's fairly straightforward to do. But we've got a flight plan. You can see it written down here from Stansted over to Dublin, and it's got a standard instrument departure involved. It's got some waypoints and some airways involved, and it's got a standard terminal arrival route involved. And we'll be going in ILS into 28 left at Dublin. Okay, we'll have a little look at that when we come to program the flight plan into the MCDU. But in the meantime, what do we need to do to get the airplane up and running then? So first things first, we're going to go overhead. So we're going to press Alt and 1. And we're going to make sure the batteries are on. So there's 2 battery buttons. We press them one after another. And you'll see no lights come on there immediately, but lights start to appear everywhere else. Now, if you've got external power available, you can also press it. So it says Avail on the external power button. So we will press it. So what that's done, if we go and look around the outside of the airplane, is we're now using the external power over here, which is plugged into the underneath of the aircraft. Okay, so that's given us a lot more power for systems to come online. Okay, so in the external lights at the bottom left, next thing we're going to go and do is put the strobes onto auto and the nav lights to 2 or up. And then the APU section, the auxiliary power unit, is a small jet engine in the rear of the aircraft that can also provide electrical power, but more importantly compressed air. So it can both pressurize the cabin or begin that pressurization function, but also it can provide compressed air to spin up the engines to start them. So we need to turn the master switch on, and then we can press the start button. It takes a few seconds before you can press the start button. So if we press shift and space to come back down into the cockpit, and we look down here, you can see this screen without pressing anything on these buttons down here that control what's on this screen. By default, this will show the appropriate screen for what's going on with the aircraft. And you can see at the moment APU gen is at 0%. That will go up. Okay, so if we go and press APU down here, see it's showing the same thing. It's saying the flap is open, and you can see the speed of the APU is increasing. The exhaust gas temperature is climbing. It does take a little while for the APU to get running. So if we go and have a look outside the aircraft and we move the view round behind it, you will see hot air pouring out of the exhaust port. So that's the exhaust for the auxiliary power unit. You can hear it winding up. So again, if we go and look back inside, you'll see when this gets to 100%, you'll suddenly get electrical power available to the aircraft. So it's just climbing, climbing, climbing. So I'll wait for that to happen. Normally you wouldn't wait, I just wanted to show you that the numbers change. There we go, look. So we've got APU available to use. And you can see the percentages coming up. Okay, so we have the auxiliary power unit up and running. As I said, you normally wouldn't have to wait for that, but I thought there's some value in showing you that. So Alt and 1 will take us back overhead. So that's a view I have configured. Okay, so it covers that in the document of how to configure custom views. Bizarrely, in AnyBuilds or Asobo's infinite wisdom, they didn't give us a default view to look overhead. Okay, so what's next? We've done the APU. We're going to go and turn the crew oxygen supply on. Then we're going to go to the signs, and we're going to arm the emergency lights, turn the no smoking sign to auto, and the emergency exit sign. Oh, we've already done that one, sorry. And then the ADIRS. So this ADIRS stands for Air Data Inertial Reference System. So this is the system by which way the aeroplane knows which way up it is, or if it's turning, or if it's pitching, and so on and so forth. So we turn all three of these on. Now, I've got it set at the moment to instant alignment. You can control that in the tablet. So if you go and look in options in the tablet, you can see here IRS align time. I've got it set to instant. In the real world, it can be anywhere from 6, 7, 8 minutes. So if you set it to instant, you don't have to wait for that. So it's probably not going to affect us today. But it does mean we've immediately got the aeroplane knowing which way up it is, which if we didn't have that set to instant, that wouldn't be enabled yet. Okay, so looking around the cockpit, you've got the controls along here for the brightness of the screens. So the PFD and the navigation display, so primary flight display, navigation display, and then the same on the other side, navigation display, primary flight display. So you can see the two knobs for those are there for the brightness. The brightness of these two screens is configured by these two rollers here. And then you can configure the brightness of the MCDUs themselves. There's a bright dim rocker switch alongside each side. And we have got two of these, and they work the same as each other, and they are independent. Okay, so we don't need to play with any brightnesses because everything looks good. So if we were using Simbrief at this point, it becomes rather elementary, and I'll show you both ways. I promised I would. So Shift and 5 will show us the tablet. We go and click on the dashboard. Well, before we do that, actually, if you've never configured it before for Simbrief, you need to go into Options, and you need to put your Simbrief Pilot ID in the box. So that's how the simulator knows whose flight plan to go and grab. So we said earlier, I've gone and filed a flight plan. You can see the details of it here. So then when I go to dashboard, once I've got my ID in the options, I can click Simbrief on the dashboard, and it will go fetch the details of my flight for me. Okay, if we go and look in OFP now, that's the operational flight plan. So this is, broadly speaking, this is the document that you see the crews carrying onto the aeroplane. that they use to program the flight in the real world. One of the more important things that's in here is the planned fuel. So if you don't have a Simbrief flight plan, but you have some sort of flight plan, or you want to guesstimate the fuel, then how much fuel you've got on the aeroplane. You can see here 5109 is the block fuel. That's the important number. But then we're going to kind of cheat in a way. We're going to go over to payload now, and we can pull the payload from Simbrief. Okay. So we're pulling the numbers, and you can see that's pulled in the number of passengers, the cargo, and the fuel. And then we can apply the load to the aeroplane. Now we can either do it realistically, which will take 40 minutes, or we can do it instantaneously, and it's done it for us. Okay. Next thing we're going to go and do is calculate the takeoff numbers for the aeroplane. So now we know how heavy the plane is, and we've got from our flight plan where we're going to be taking off from. So we can go to takeoff, and we can click on sync, and we can change the runway. We're going to be taking off on, let's just double check this. We're taking off runway 22. So let's go and change that to runway 22. And then we can calculate. Now look, it's saying unable to find safe performance data. So we haven't got a weight programmed in. So if you remember, if we go and look in payload, you've got live gross weight 61.9 tons. Okay, so take off, go and click in here, and we can type in 61.9. And then having done that, we can then click on calculate, and the aeroplane will figure out at what speed it can rotate. And that's based on a basic level of flaps, so flaps 1. So we've got all these numbers. Now, we don't have to remember these numbers. We can send them straight to the flight management and guidance system. So we can just press send to FMGS. Okay? So that's all done. The next thing we do is go to the flight guidance system itself. So Alt and 2, again, there was no key for this. So when you're looking at this system, if there are any messages at the bottom, they appear as a stack. So every time you press clear, you'll see the previous message going back through time. So you can see where we've been doing things, messages have been popping up. So we just clear them all out. So then if any messages do appear, we know what's new, if that makes sense. So we want to go to the FMGC, Flight Management Guidance Computer. So we wait for the system to load. And then once it's loaded up, it shows us information about its current database. And then we can click on the Init button. So if we are using Simbrief, this is where we can make some shortcuts. So we can say init request and just press it. And it's fetched the flight plan. Okay? But it hasn't fetched everything. It hasn't got anything about the weight of the aircraft. It hasn't got anything about the departure or the arrival procedures at each end of the flight. It's just got the routing. Okay? It's got the cost index and it's got the cruise altitude. But it hasn't got how we leave Stansted, how we arrive at Dublin. So it said it's done the uplink, so it's fetched the data. So how do we go about filling in the missing pieces then? First of all, we go sideways on the init page. So we've got 0 fuel weight and the block fuel to fill in. If you see boxes, they are mandatory fields. So we can press the button next to 0 fuel weight and it will calculate it automatically based on the current weight of the aircraft. So then rather than filling in block fuel, you can just say fuel planning and give it a moment. And it will come back with some numbers. There it comes, and say block confirm. And it does some more calculations and then it'll be happy. Okay? So how do we go and set up that departure and arrival? So we click on flight plan and that shows us everything that got downloaded from Simbrief. If you want to set the departure from Stansted, it's the top left entry. So when you press flight plan, it always scrolls to the top. But conversely, although there's more on here than will fit on the screen, the bottom line always shows the destination airport. So you'll notice when you press the up and down buttons, so notice if I keep pressing down, we're pushing the contents of the screen downwards. So think about these buttons in terms of pushing the contents of the screen in a direction. So if you want to scroll down, you press the up arrow repeatedly. Yeah, so we can see you've got all of the routing in there. So we're back up to EGSS again. So just to demonstrate that, if we scroll down a bit and then I press flight plan, we're back up at the top. So to configure the departure from Stansted, we press the soft key next to it. So these buttons along the side are commonly called soft keys because they have different functions on any screen. So if I select the button next to Stansted, it then comes up with a menu and we can select departure. Now we can say which runway we are taking off from, so we're going to take off from runway 22. And then we can say which standard instrument departure we're going to be doing. So if we go and refer to our flight plan here, we're doing the UTAV 1R standard instrument departure. So you can see it's not listed, so we can scroll through them in the same way, and there it is, look. So we select the soft key next to it, and that's programmed that in. So then we can insert that, and it becomes let me show you this on a diagram. So a standard instrument departure is kind of like a macro. It's a number of waypoints in a sequence with potentially speed and altitude restrictions at those waypoints. And by choosing that particular standard instrument departure, I've programmed all of that in one go. Okay? So you can see all of these different waypoints now. These are that snaking curve as we leave the airport. You've got different speed restrictions, different altitude restrictions on the way out. So a star means holding at the same. It's a restriction at 4,000 feet. If we scroll this through, you'll see it suddenly release. When we get through Utava, it releases, and then we're going up towards Woburn, flight level 196. So that's 19,600 feet. That's estimating it at that point. Okay, so we've done how we leave from Stansted. If we go and select Dublin, we can say how we're going to arrive at Dublin. So notice it doesn't say departure, it says arrival. So it does have some sense. So we click on arrival and let's go and have a look. So what did our flight plan say? We can look on the Simbrief version. It's the Able I4L standard terminal arrival route, or STAR, into runway 28 left. So the first thing this is going to ask is the runway and the approach. So ILS means that's the approach. We want 28 left. So let's go up. ILS 28 left. There it is. And then there's the Able I4L. Let's just double check that. Able I4L, that matches. So we select it, and again, all it is like a macro, a number of waypoints. And in this case, it's a far more interesting one than the SID even. Look at that lot. So just by choosing Able I4L, programs all of this in, along with any restrictions along the way. So you can see, look, above 2,500 feet, above 3,000 feet, below 220 knots, 7,000 feet, below 220 knots, and so on and so forth. But that's all done just by choosing Able I4L. And then we can insert it, and that's put all of that into our flight plan. So now we can scroll down through and see if we've got any discontinuities. So basically a discontinuity is a gap in the flight plan, and we haven't got any, I don't think. So just scrolling down through. No, it's looking good, look. So if you did have a line saying discontinuity, you just hit the clear button and then select the discontinuity to remove it. So if we press flight plan, remember, it comes straight back up to the top. So having set up the flight plan, the next thing to do is the performance data. So let's go over to the tablet again. And we saw the takeoff data, and we saw that we were able to send data to the FMGS. Yeah, which I can do again, it won't hurt it. If we then press Shift and 3 to come over here, or no, I've got a better view than that. I've got a custom view on Alt and 2 on my keyboard. Then we can see the MCDU again. So if I press performance, you will see there are some blue numbers next to these boxes. Those are the numbers that I've come across when we sent the data. But there's more than just those. There's also all of this data is hidden away. So once you have sent the data, you can select confirm takeoff data, and it will all populate in one go. So we could go and key those in by hand, and we could refer to the tablet and fill these in. Or we can just go click. Yeah, and it's done. We can clear the message and we can say next phase. So then it will show you your climb performance data. We can leave that alone. Next phase is cruise. We can leave that alone. Then descent and approach. So during the flight, the system will put a message up asking you to populate the approach data. It makes no sense to do it right now because the weather's changeable and it wouldn't be accurate by the time we get there. So we could go in and fill in the QNH at the destination and the temperature and the wind and so on and so forth. So I'm going to do it now just to show you how it works. So I'm going to use Navigraph. It doesn't matter where you get the data from. So we're going to go and select Dublin, open the airport, go to the weather, and you can see this will give us our QNH, so 997 hectopascals. So we key in 997 and then we select the field where we want to populate it. Okay, temperature on the ground is 16 degrees in Dublin, so 16 goes into the scratch pad and then drop it into the temperature, and then the wind is going to be 160 degrees 5 knots, so we want 160/5, 160/5, and drop that in. The two numbers over here are your decision altitude. You will need charts if you want to find that out. It's not 100%. You don't need it, for. It's not an absolutely required, mandatory thing to populate, but we can. So I'm going to show you where we're going to get it from. We're going to look on an ILS chart, and you can see we've either got radio 105 feet or 302 feet if we're only using barometric pressure. Yeah. So we're going to say, and again, it depends on the kind of approach, but we're going to say 105 on radio. You can't do both. Okay. You've also got landing configuration you can choose from. So we've got configuration 3. That basically means flaps 3. At the moment it's set to full. We could set it to flaps 3 if we wanted to. That's what that really means. So at the moment it's configured for full flaps. Okay, that's everything. So after you've programmed the flight plan, you would normally go and carry on with getting the rest of the airplane ready. I'm going to wipe what we've just done to show you programming it by hand, or some elements of programming it by hand. So if you want to wipe out what you've just done, go to init and reprogram where you're going from and to. Yeah, so we're typing in this and select it, and now this is quite clever. What it's showing us is a potential route it could take to go across the country. Yeah, so it's going to do direct. It's doing pretty much the same route we just chose. Direct, then an airway, direct, another airway, direct. So we can just insert that. There's only one option it's come up with, so we'll insert that. So if we go and look in the flight plan, you can see what that actually looks like. So it's saying check IRS and airport position. That's fine. Check takeoff data. So everything we'd already done has basically been messed up because we've gone and reprogrammed the route. So we can go into, to set the departure, remember, we can go to EGSS. So we'll press flight plan to come up to the top, select EGSS, departure, runway 22, and we were going to go and do, was it UTAV 1R? Let's just double check it. Yeah, it was UTAV 1R. Okay, and insert that into our flight plan. Check takeoff data. So then we can go and select our destination, go into the arrival and just reprogram that again. So doing the same thing we did previously. 28 left and the ABLI 4L. So 28 left and ABLI 4L, and insert that into the flight plan as we program that. We need to go back and look at the performance data. Is it still correct? It looks like it's okay. So obviously it was just reminding us earlier to go check because everything's changed. But now it's back as it was. It's a lot happier with it. So next phase, next phase, next phase, next phase. It's remembered all of this. Obviously if we hadn't already done this, it wouldn't be there and we'd have to fill it in. It has lost though, look, as we went and reprogrammed the destination, it's lost the decision altitude. So let's go and have another look. Radar or radio 105. 105. Okay. So we've got our basics into the aeroplane. We're just going to check these numbers are all populated still. They are. That's all good. Flight plan had no discontinuities in it. We can scroll down through and make sure. When you are looking at the flight plan, typically on the navigation display, so before we do this, I'm going to press flight plan so we're at the top. On the navigation display, you've typically got this aircraft oriented forward view called arc mode. If you rotate this knob over here to plan mode, it will put the aeroplane in, or not the aeroplane, it will put the position in the center of the display. And the position it's indicating is the second line on the MCDU. So now when we scroll the waypoints upwards, in other words, through that second line, the navigation display will move the center point. So we can go through our flight plan and double check it. Yeah? So you can see, and then you can make sure that it makes sense. When you're happy with that, you put it back into arc mode and it goes back to looking from the aircraft's position. And we can obviously press flight plan to come back up to the top. Okay, so we've programmed the flight plan both manually and through the MCDU. One of the major new features of this is that it showed us a calculated flight plan. Okay, so we're going to carry on with pre-flight now, at last. So shift and space brings us back into the cockpit. We're going to press comma, which will calibrate the altimeter. Now, because I've turned the weather off, so we've got a nice calm day for the purposes of the demo, the altimeter didn't change. It's at the standard barometric pressure, so 1013 or 2992 inches. So you never saw it move. If we'd had realistic weather, you would have seen it move. So we're now going to go to Shift 7 and Shift 8, but I'm going to do it from one side actually, from the normal cockpit view. So this panel up here is called the Flight Guidance Control Panel, or FGCP. And it controls, as you can see, the barometric pressure. It also controls, this is the bit we're interested in, is the guidance system. So we can select our target airspeed and our heading and our altitude and our vertical speed. Now at the moment, those are showing numbers that we can configure. If we turn on the flight directors, this will get sight of the flight plan. And it will see, oh, we've got a fully programmed flight plan and all the performance data. That's everything this knows to drive the aeroplane. Look what's happened. So we're going to turn it on both sides. So you can see it's saying also there's an indication here. Flight directors 1 and 2 are on. So this is the flight director is the part of the guidance systems that figures out where to fly. The autopilot is the bit that executes it. Okay, so the flight director does all the working out. So what does this mean? This means if you see dots with dashes, it means we are not telling it the speed to fly at. It's going to fly at the speed in the flight plan. It's going to target the speed in the flight plan. It's not going to fly at the altitude, or sorry, at the heading we command. It's going to, if you see dashes and a dot, it means it's going to follow the headings to get to the waypoints on the flight plan, one after another automatically. Okay, if we go and select an altitude to climb to, now we're going to cheat slightly to show you this. We know on our Simbrief flight plan we need to get to 34,000 feet. So rather than putting an initial climb in, which a controller might give you, we're going to go straight for our cruise altitude and say 34,000 feet. And once we've selected it, we press the top half of this rolling selector. So what does that mean? If you press the top half of any of these, they push towards the aeroplane. You see that? If you roll them, they appear again. But if you push them towards the aeroplane, they vanish again, apart from altitude. That's because altitude is a bit of a special case. We're actually setting the target altitude for the aeroplane to get to, eventually. If we press the top half of the knob, or any of these knobs, we are pushing them towards the aeroplane, which tells the aeroplane you make the decisions. If we click the bottom half of the knobs, that's the same as pulling them. Yeah, and when you pull them, notice it's come up with the speed number. It means we are making the decision. So you're pulling it towards the crew or towards the aeroplane. Yeah? So we're going to leave it pushed towards the aeroplane, so it will just follow the instructions in the flight plan completely. Now, I said altitude is a bit of a special case. We are going to be flying a standard instrument departure. It's all programmed in. It's got speeds, it's got altitude restrictions along the way. So we can go and program 34,000 feet. It won't get there straight away. It will stop at 4,000 feet. We already saw there was a restriction. And on the way down into Dublin, it will stop at 7,000 feet when it's descending around that big arc around the airfield. So the trick here is you set your target altitude, you push the knob in to go to managed mode, and that means the aeroplane will follow all of the restrictions for you. Okay? So that's all of that done. Nothing more to do there. Our main concern is whether these are pushed in or pulled out, and whether the flight directors are on. The flight directors have to be on for the guidance systems to work. So, overhead, we're going to turn the seatbelt sign on. And then we're going to go in, obviously the APU's been running for ages. We can turn the external power off. We may run into fuel problems because we put just enough fuel in and we've been sat burning fuel on the auxiliary power for ages. So, external power is off. We're using the APU, not the external power anymore. Okay. So then Shift and 5 will bring us down to the tablet, and we can go to the ground app, and we can remove the chocks from the aeroplane, or we should be able to. And I think it's already done it. So, but more importantly, we can remove the GPU. Okay, so yeah, so red means that they're not there. Green means they are there. So when we first got on the aeroplane, the chocks would have been there. So if we go and look outside, they're not there anymore. So the reason we're doing all of this, of unbuckling everything, unplugging things, is we're getting ready for pushback. Okay. So to do pushback, we're just going to press Alt and P. And if I sit up slightly, you'll see the tractor come in. And we're going to get ready to release the parking brake. So the parking brake's here. If it's up, it's off. So I've done that on my primary flight controls, my physical flight controls. You do get to control the pushback direction here. We want the tail to go to the left, just because of where we are. If I show you from the outside view, we want to go that way. So, it's already doing it, look. It's going the right way. Flight Simulator doesn't always get it right. Now, in the real world, if you've been on holiday, you'll have seen that the crew starts the engine during the pushback. We don't have 15 pairs of hands to do everything, and I'm busy talking and explaining, so we're going to wait. And then we'll do it in a moment. So let's see if the pushback stops all on its own. Again, different airplanes behave in different ways in the simulator. We'll hang on. Yeah, it stopped. Look, and it's just let us roll. That was nice of them. We'll put our parking brake back on. Okay, so we can go start the engines. So first thing we're going to do before we start the engines is turn the beacon light on. That tells anybody on the ground we're about to start the engines. Then we're going to go further overhead and we're going to go and turn all of the fuel pumps on. So, something worth pointing out, you'll see I'm suddenly reverting to just moving the view around with the mouse. There is huge value to looking around to find switches rather than using shortcuts, because then you build up a three-dimensional model of the aeroplane in your head of where things are. Okay, So APU bleed needs to go on. So remember, we've got the APU running. We're now going to go and vent the air from it through the engines. So APU on. Sorry, APU bleed on. And we're going to start the engines. So if we scroll back down here, I'm going to get this screen, both screens in view at the same time as these switches. So I've got these as physical switches. So we're going to turn the ignition to start, which was down here. Now I'm going to advance engine number 1. And you will see the N2 number is climbing over here. N2 is the speed of the axle through the middle of the gas turbine. Now it's fully automated on the Airbus. You have nothing to do from this point on until the engine's ready. This light will go out when the engine's ready. So you'll see the turbo fan. N1 is the turbo fan, the big fan on the front of the engine. So that's its speed. But when the fuel gets injected, which should be about now, there it goes, the exhaust gas temperature rises and the fuel flow, you can see the rate of fuel going into the engine in kilograms an hour. So obviously the engine's getting hotter, and now it's obviously creating some thrust. You can see the speed of the turbofan is coming up as well. Okay, so once the light has gone out, as we said, it's ready, so we can do the other engine. So I'm going to advance engine number 2. You saw the switch go forwards down there. And you can see the same thing is happening now on engine number 2. So if we were to go and look outside, we've got hot air pouring out of the engine. It's not so obvious. It depends on the different aeroplane models in the simulator, you know, how accurately they portray that. So we're just waiting for the engine to come up to speed, and of course once it is up to speed we can go and switch off the APU bleed and the APU, because there's a cross feed that happens, or not a cross feed, a bus transfer that happens automatically in the Airbus. As soon as the engines are up to speed, they can generate all the electricity the aircraft needs, so you don't need the APU anymore to generate electricity. So you can see engine's ready, the light's gone out. So we're going to go overhead. We're going to turn off the APU bleed. We don't need the compressed air anymore to spin the engines up. And we're going to turn off the APU as well, because the engines are now generating electricity, so power generation has automatically switched over to the gas turbines, you know, the big engines. Okay, so first things first, let's go and get the flaps in the right place, ready for takeoff in a few minutes. So let's go and move the flap lever. I've used my primary controls to do it. Flaps to 1. You can confirm they are moving here on the display. And you can see there's a few bits and pieces still to go through. So we need to go and program TCAS. So Shift and 2 will bring us to the back. So TCAS typically on the Airbus, not always, is over here. So we're going to put it on auto, and we're going to switch this to on, and we're going to switch this to TA mode. Okay, so that's the traffic collision avoidance system. Typically you wouldn't do this until you're on the runway, but we're going to do it now. And when it's on, you will see TA only appear here, and you get dotted lines, range rings. So this is the system that will tell you if anything comes within this range of the aeroplane, alarms will go off. Okay, so we now need to go and set the predictive wind shear. So there's 2 systems, so it's labelled PWS. We rock this forwards to number 1. And what we're actually doing is looking at this screen as well to see what hasn't been done yet. So we've got the parking brake on, we've still got ignition on. So we can go and switch ignition back to norm. So you see the knob move there. And we've just got the parking brake, it's the only thing it's telling us about. But look, now we've got to this state in the aeroplane, the takeoff checklist has appeared. So it's saying, is the auto brake on? Let's go do it. Max. Cabin is being checked. Are the spoilers armed? No, they're not. So these are the ground spoilers. So this would normally be your air brake lever. You can pull it up And what that does is pressurizes the cylinders to raise the spoilers really quick, and across the whole of the wing. So it's pressurizing the system, ready to go for an emergency. So then finally we've got the takeoff config test. We'll do that when we get to the runway. So I'm going to take advantage of my head tracking, which you may not have. It makes taxiing easy for me. Let's just get rid of this out of the way. We have an engine problem. Oh no, we haven't. We've got a pushback problem. The pushback tug hadn't actually released us a bug in the simulator. As soon as I came off the parking brake, the aeroplane was just trying to be pushed backwards again. So I pressed Alt and P a second time. It is a bug. So we're just going to gently roll out. So doing this properly, you should go and put the taxi lights on as well. Have we got enough clearance to get past it? Let's have a look. Just, it's a good job I am wide, isn't it? So, there's no hurry with taxiing, especially if you're not on the runway. You shouldn't be taxiing quickly. So if you've got a solid line on the navigation display, you know you've got a good route programmed. If it's not a solid line, then you've got an incompletion somewhere in the route and you need to go check it. So you would go to the flight plan page on the MCDU to do that and look for discontinuities. It's rolling out to runway 22. So once you get onto the runway, we will go and put the strobe lights on. We would also put the landing lights on. And then we go and do the final check. So we press that takeoff config button. So you can see cabin is now showing ready. It takes them a few moments to do that usually in this version of the aeroplane. So let the nose go out over the centre line and then bring it back round. Straighten it up. Obviously if you're using air traffic services, then you would be talking to them at this point. So I'll turn head tracking back off again so we can explain this. So we're going to go and put the strobe lights to on, landing lights to on, nose lights to take off, and then down in here you can see it's got the takeoff config is showing normal. It's already done it. We didn't have to actually press it, so it's seen that everything is fine. If you're not sure, if it's not showing normal, you can press takeoff config to force it to do a check. Okay, so I will set the view up without head tracking to do this. I'm going to come off the parking brake and I'm going to push the throttles all the way forwards. Now, there's something before we do that to explain to you. The throttle system on the Airbus is electronic. When we push it all the way forwards, you'll notice if we move the view forward slightly, these markers are called detents. Now I've got a physical control which has these notches in it, so the control naturally stops at them. So all the way forwards is takeoff or go around. So it's full power basically. Then you've got flex or maximum continuous thrust. Then you've got climb, and then between there you've got your analog throttle settings. If you were controlling it manually, you know, you would be setting, that would be 100%, that would be 50%, and so on. The way the electronic system works, as soon as you are clear of the runway, so you go toga obviously to take off power. As soon as you're climbing out and the aircraft is stabilized, you pull the throttles back to the climb detent. In the climb detent, the auto throttle can control it all itself. So the managed speed mode in combination with the auto throttle will only work if the throttles are left on the climb detent. If they are not there, the throttle won't follow the rules to do the speeds that are programmed. Okay, so let's get our view slightly to one side so you get to see everything. Parking brake is off. You can see we're just creeping forwards. That Airbuses do that. They have a small amount of positive thrust. So on a smooth surface, such as a runway or a taxiway, they will creep forwards. So we're going to push the throttles all the way forwards. So it's gone toga. So then we steer gently to hold the centre line. We're looking on the indicated airspeed ribbon for the rotate marker to come through. You can see this is the triangle. And then we start to rotate at no more than 3 degrees per second, up to 15 degrees. As soon as we have positive climb rate, the gear can come up. And then we can let go of the stick, basically, or just keep pushing it gently one way or the other to hold the direction, and autopilot can come on. And then you're watching the speed ready, but don't be too soon on lifting the flaps. So the throttles are still at toga at the moment, so keep them at toga until you start accelerating again, because the initial climb will be steep. So it's saying lever climb on the display there under speed. So throttles, I've now pulled them back to the climb detent, which means the auto throttle came on as soon as we went to toga, but it can't take control until the throttles are in the climb detent. So we're accelerating again now. Yep, so I'm going to go raise the flaps, which means the ribbon's vanished for the speed restriction. So the airplane is now going to be targeting 250 knots, which is typically the speed you want below 10,000 feet. It's the speed limit below 10,000 feet for commercial traffic. So you can see the airplane's making its first turn here, but it's coming up to 4,000 feet. If you remember, that was a restriction in the standard instrument departure. We're not allowed any higher than 4,000 feet until we get further on down the road. So notice it's pulled the throttles all the way back because it's leveled out. It's holding 250 knots automatically. So it's going to be a little bit strange in this test flight because we've got no weather on. So the barometric pressure, you're not going to see a difference. But when we come through the transition altitude, we need to recalibrate our altimeter to standard barometric pressure. So what this is all about is at low altitudes, aeroplanes tune their altimeter to know where the ground is. At higher altitudes, aeroplanes tune their altimeters to match each other. So if one aeroplane thinks it's at 20,000 feet and another aeroplane thinks it's at 20,000 feet, they are both at the same altitude, regardless if that's actually 20,000 feet. Yeah, so that in that way they can avoid each other accurately. So above what's called the transition altitude, and it's different for different parts of the world, it's 6,000 feet for most of the UK. So when we climb through 6,000 feet, we will go, and you can see on the end of this knob it says pull STD. It's kind of worn away. So we will click the bottom half of this knob when we start climbing. We'll start climbing at Utava. You can see it's actually marked in with a little upward arrow. So we go and look at that on Navigraph, and just to show you the chart of the departure, look, we're holding. So Barkway from 3,000 to 4,000 feet. At Barkway, 4,000. The curve doesn't quite match what the aeroplane's doing, but we're on our way towards Utava. We still have to be at 4,000 feet at Utava. Then we go out towards Woburn and all restrictions are lifted because because that is the end of the standard instrument departure, so we can begin climbing. Once we get through 10,000 feet, the 250 knot limit goes away as well. So you'll see the aeroplane take care of that all on its own. So we're just watching at the moment. So when we come through Utava, you'll see the engines suddenly open up and the climb rate increase enormously. So while we're doing this, waiting, we can go and turn that nose light off because the gear is up, obviously. So we're coming through Utava. So watch the engines. Go, throttle climb, engines are opening up, but notice the throttles don't move in an Airbus. So you can see a climb rate, it's gone crazy, altitude is climbing, we've gone just above 250 knots, so it hasn't quite managed it perfectly. We're actually overspeeding below 10,000 feet by 10 knots, look at the moment. But it is kind of trying to even it back out. Different aeroplanes get this better or worse than each other. So we're coming through 6,000 feet, which I know is the transition altitude. Notice, look, the aeroplane knows it's flashing, QNH. So we pull this and it goes to standard. Pull the other side as well, it's doing the same thing. So now it says STD instead of the barometric pressure underneath the altitude ribbon. What it really means is it's tuned to 2992 or 1013 hectopascals. So aircraft is climbing out now, going to 8,000 feet. As soon as we get through 10,000 feet, you will see this target airspeed shoot up to about 300 knots. And we want to get ready to go and turn the landing lights off as well at 10,000 feet. We don't need them on anymore. Okay, there we go, look, the target's gone. So it's dropping the nose, it's going to favour getting to the speed. So it's reducing the climb rate in order to accelerate. When it gets to its target airspeed, the nose will lift again, because it will use as much power as it can to get to altitude as quickly as it can. But it's favouring getting to airspeed first. So when we get to the target airspeed, you'll see the nose lift again, but it won't come off the throttles. See, as it approaches it, you can see the nose is coming up gently, you can see the climb rate coming up. So it's trying to judge it, to lift the nose to stop the acceleration. So we've come through 10,000 feet a few moments ago. Let's go and turn the landing lights off. So at this point, the aeroplane will manage itself getting all the way up to 34,000 feet and will happily just cruise on in that way. So we could, I'll do it a little bit early because I'm going to pause recording in a moment so I don't bore you to tears in the middle of the flight. We would go and turn the seatbelt signs off, obviously, when we get to cruise altitude and let everybody go and run to the bathroom, as they always seem to on commercial flights. We can change the navigation display range to show us more of the downrange waypoints. Obviously it pays to have a closer range during takeoff so you can see what's going on. You can see the top of climb is marked there with like a level out curved arrow. So it's predicting when we will reach top of climb. So I'm going to pause recording there. Oh, earlier on, before I do go, I put the APU screen on, and obviously it's not showing us everything we could see here because we have selected a mode on the, this is called the ECAM screen, by the way. So if I press APU again, it goes away. If you've got no other mode on, this will show a summary screen with lots of information on it. Okay, about the cabin pressurization system, temperatures, the outside air temperature, all sorts of things. Obviously you can then go through all the different systems to check the status of things on the aeroplane. But if you press any that are on so that you've got none lit up anymore, then you'll see this hybrid screen which shows a screen relevant to the phase of flight you're in. Okay, so at some point during the flight, I'll do this now before it actually asks for it. It will go and ask you to put the approach data in for the destination. So you will go back to the perf button, and then you will go next phase, next phase, next phase until you get to approach. Now we've already done it. Yeah, so we have nothing to do. But it's just showing you that's where you go to do it. It's the perf button, and then flick through the phases. So while you're flying, typically you might have the flight plan page on, and because you have two MCDUs, you can have different things on each screen. So we might have flight plan this side, and then you might want something else on the other side. So you could go, for example, for the prog button if it's going to work. There we go. So prog is progress, and it will show you what phase of the flight you're in and what things are doing. You could also put anything else that you want to do though. So you could go for, you know, the fuel prediction or the radios to go and check. So you might be wanting to check the ILS for the other end, which is already all programmed in. So obviously when we programmed the destination data into the MCDU, it picked up the ILS automatically. You don't have to go and tune it in on the Airbus, or you shouldn't have to. Okay, so I'm going to pause recording there. Oh, one last thing. We're climbing out now, so there's nothing could affect us too much. So we're going to go and set the TCAS to TARA, not TA. The difference between those, TA mode means you are transmitting your position to the world around you. RA means you will respond to others. Okay? So it's response. Transmit and response. Okay? That's all that I really want to get into that, because it's quite a complicated subject, and so, to be honest, so is the guidance systems. There's a lot more to the guidance systems on the more accurately modelled Airbuses than I understand. So the different models of laws that they operate under and what will cause them to go into different laws. So there's basically different operating regimes for the systems depending on the health of the system. Anyway, I said I was going to pause, didn't I? There's always something else to talk about. That's the thing, and that's what fascinates me about the big airliners, is there's no end to the learning. You know, there's layers and layers and layers of it. So when you listen to the professional pilots going through their reasoning, it's really fascinating, because obviously the more you learn, the more you realise how much they know in addition to what you've learned so far. And the more they take for granted, because it's part of their day-to-day job to deal with all of this reasoning and reacting to things that might crop up. Anyway, I'll pause there, and when we get to near the top of descent, I will unpause. So I'll see you in a few moments. It'll be in the blink of an eye for you. It'll be probably 20 minutes, half an hour for me. See you in a moment. Okay, so if you look at the navigation display, you can see at the range we're working at here, we can see all the way to Dublin. You can also see in about 40 miles or so, the top of descent marker is smoothly moving towards us. So this is the point at which we will need to start descending. The airplane will not descend on its own, because we have told it to fly at 34,000 feet. So the way we get it to fly at a lower altitude is to change the target altitude, while also operating, obviously, in managed mode. So we've pushed the knob towards the aeroplane, remember, to get it to operate in managed mode. So the aeroplane's going to do what it thinks to get to the altitude. So where this comes into play, you can see if we press the flight plan button, we're on our way between Broomy and Pepsi at the moment. which you can see here, we're between Broomy and Pepsi. And it knows at Pepsi, we're still going to be at flight level 339. It's actually thinking about beginning to, or it's not exactly at flight level 340, look. It's not going to descend yet. Top of descent happens after Pepsi, which you can see. So if we go and change our target altitude, and we could set it down to 0, because we're in managed mode, remember? But we could also go and have a look at our chart and just see what would be an appropriate altitude to bring it down to. So let's go and pull open this diagram of the approach. So 7,000 feet would be a good example, but I'm going to set it to 0 so you get to see it making its decisions. Well, actually, what would be even better, if I didn't go and rotate the map, would be to set the altitude target to the decision height or something near it. Yeah, so if we go for, looking at these diagrams, it was 105 feet, wasn't it? So we're going to take this down to, not to 0, but to 100 feet. Okay, now we haven't reached the top of descent yet. So if I told it to start descending, it won't actually descend as quickly as it could. Okay, I'll wait until we're a little bit closer to show you what will happen. So I'm just reducing the range here so we can see a little bit of what's going on. Oh, something else I should mention, while I had the simulator, or while I had the recording paused, I went and removed the ground spoiler arming. So I pushed the stick back in. I'd forgotten to do that during the climb out. It's one of the first things you typically do, but talking and doing at the same time is always going to be a problem for me, and I completely forgot it. So I left my procedure to one side and just started talking. And there were too many interesting things to talk about. There is no indication in the cockpit that you've left it armed. But you shouldn't really leave it armed. Okay, so we're rolling in towards top of descent. So let's go, and we're going to push the button forwards, having changed the altitude to say, right, we want to go there now. Do it. So it's saying descend on the autopilot mode. Watch what happens to the vertical speed. It's only going to go to 1,000 feet a minute. It could go much higher descent rate than that. Also, notice this green dot has appeared. That is the flight profile. So that's where it would like to be flying. That's the altitude it would like to be at right now. And we have descended below that. So before it goes out of view, well, it won't go out of view. It will get clipped at the top of the altitude ribbon. So watch it get clipped. There it goes. So it's stuck up there now. So we are descending more quickly than it wanted to. But it will catch up, because remember, we are only descending at 1,000 feet a minute. Now at some point, the aircraft is going to get to a point in this plan where descending at 1,000 feet a minute will meet the rate at which it would have descended. And it will catch back up with us. And then suddenly the descent rate will increase. So I just wanted to illustrate that to you, that you can descend early. And the aeroplane won't necessarily descend as quickly as it can. It will go to 1,000 feet a minute and hold at that descent rate in managed mode. Now, if we click the bottom half of the altitude knob, it will do what's called an open descent, and it will get down as fast as it can, given the configuration of the aeroplane. So if I was to click the bottom half, I'll do it very briefly. Open descent, and you'll see, look at the descent rate shoot up. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just say manage descent, and it goes back and just says descent. So we'll let it keep descending at 1,000 feet a minute, and you will see the green dot catch up with it a bit further down range. So there's a couple of things we need to bear in mind about our approach into Dublin. We will need at 10,000 feet to turn the landing lights back on. At the transition altitude for Dublin, which may not be the same as London where we took off from, we will need to recalibrate the altimeters for the local barometric pressure at the ground at the airfield, which will tell us then very accurately how high we are above the airfield. So let's go and look that up. Obviously we know that the weather today is well, we've got no weather switched on in the sim, so we know it's going to be 2992 or 1013 hectopascals. Those are the standard barometric pressures when you don't have any weather being simulated. So we've just got custom weather. Then there'll be the same numbers. But it's just we need to get it back out of standard mode and actually dial in the barometric pressure when we come through the transition altitude. So we can find that out on the charts, what it should be. So if we look on the ILS charts, it's 5,000 feet for Dublin. Here comes the dot look. The descent profile is catching up with us. So we are now beginning to descend as fast as we can to follow a kind of a glide descent profile down. So the aeroplane predicted all of this when we programmed the flight plan. It looked at all the local weather, it looked at all of the data and said, okay, if we descend, if we begin the descent at this point, given how fast I know the aircraft can glide down, then this will put us on that path. If this green dot gets far below where we actually are, we need to help the aeroplane. So, and that's the point at which you extend the spoilers. So you pull the lever back. I'm not anticipating we'll see it today, but if you see that, if the green dot goes below you, it means you're high. And it can quite often happen, you know, with changeable weather, that you may end up, if you've got a tailwind, for example, that wasn't predicted, then you're actually going across the ground a lot faster than the aircraft thinks it or predicted it would, which means you are higher than the aircraft wanted to be later in the flight, you know, during the descent. So you end up at a higher point than you should be, and the aeroplane will need help to get down more steeply. You can see at the moment this is doing a really poor job of managing speed. It's supposed to be hitting this target airspeed and it's not. And we're actually below the profile. It's just catching up a little bit. Look, you can see it gently moving the nose around to do that. But the engines are flat idle. So it's basically gliding. And it's gliding a little bit too quick. This isn't so much of a concern until you get to low altitude. So we just keep an eye on it as it comes down, and let's go and have a refresh our memory of what the standard terminal arrival route or star looked like. So we come in, we should be at Ablin between 18,000 and 15,000 feet. So we can see Ablin is coming. And you can see Ablin here. It's targeting flight level 155, so 15,500. So we're making the right turn at Badsea towards Ablin. We reduce the range again on the navigation display. We can see the next few waypoints coming in towards us. So we're just really babysitting the aeroplane at this point. We're helping it if it needs any help. So it's going a bit quick still, isn't it? Should we throw the spoilers out? So I put the speed brakes out to their first notch, and it's not really helping. The thing is, it may opt to dip the nose. There we go. So 2 notches of speed brake are reducing the speed. This is where the different versions of the Airbus will show their differences or their accuracy. So the INI builds developed Airbus A320 version 2 that comes free with the sim is pretty good, but it's not perfect. The Phoenix and some of the others are a little bit more accurate, but then you pay for what you get. You're getting the INI built one for nothing. So I've come back off the spoilers now, the speed brake line has gone away, and you can see we're pretty much holding that speed. Obviously as you descend it becomes easier for the aeroplane because the air gets thicker, so there's more resistance. So more tools for the aeroplane to use. So we're coming through Ablin, we were looking at 15,500 and it was on the money, wasn't it? So remember we're targeting 100 feet, but it won't be able to get there because there's restrictions. Look, there's a star next to 7,000 feet at Peacock. And Peacock is just before we go into this big curving arc. So let's go and refresh our memory. If we go and look at the ILS chart, 5,000 feet was the transition altitude and 10,000 feet for the lights. So the aeroplane is managing its own way down. Not much to talk about at the moment. The airplane's just doing what it does. You can see you've got the mode the autopilot is operating in is always across the top of the primary flight display. Don't go by what's lit up or set over here. This is what it's doing. Yeah, everything, all the information on the primary flight display will tell you what's going on. So it's doing lateral navigation, in other words, following the waypoints. It's descending. It has a radio minimum that it will call out on final approach. The auto throttle is working, the flight directors are on, systems 1 and 2, and autopilot 1 is engaged. So, look what it's doing. It's got to just above 10,000 feet and it's lifted the nose. It's trying to lose the speed to get to 250 knots. We can help it. So it doesn't need to descend yet, but if that starts to fall below significantly, we can help it. So let's go and throw the spoilers out and increase that rate of deceleration. So I've gone to maximum spoilers. So the aeroplane is trying to get to 250 knots and it's doing it in a slight descent, look, because it can, because we put the spoilers out. And then once it gets to 250 knots, it can go below 10,000 feet. I'll remove the spoilers now, and here we go, it'll start descending again. It'll be looking for 7,000 feet, won't it? There we go, nose is dropping. So it's following the profile down to 7,000 feet now for Peacock. Now, on this display, I've not been showing the numbers yet. I'll reduce it a little bit more. If we click CSTR, that means constraint. And it will show you the numbers, look. So it wants 240 knots at Lipgo, 7,000 feet at Peacock, 220 knots and 7,000 at Sivna. And I think it's the same all the way around, you just can't quite see them. But I didn't want to show you that until we were a little bit closer, just so they weren't too jumbled up. So the constraint button is your friend. It means you don't have to interpret this, which isn't always the easiest thing to read. Okay, you can see we're dropping below the profile, but the aeroplane is reacting. The throttles are even further back than they were. They're coming up, look, it's starting to balance the airspeed. So we're 240 at the moment on the numbers. And we're coming back down towards 7,000 feet, so it's looking good. Should we have a look outside? It's always tempting, isn't it, that in the simulator, although saying that, it's so cloudy we can't really see very much, but it'd be nice to see the aeroplane. It does look amazing, doesn't it? Even the free A320 from any builds that comes with Flight Simulator is very, very good. Okay. So targeting 7,000 feet, the green dot is still in the middle, so it's targeting it and it's on target at the moment. We're still on standard barometric pressure. Remember, we need at 5,000 feet, we need to switch to local, which means we push this knob back in and set the barometric pressure by hand. So there's 7,000 feet that it's targeting. So notice we are asking for 100, but it's highlighting 7,000 because that is flight level 070. Flight levels are in hundreds. So 70 hundreds is 7,000. We go, the engines have come up to maintain 240 at 7,000 feet. So at this point we are basically flying an arc around Dublin. So there's the final approach into the airport. We're going to fly all the way around and then turn in. So let's go and have a closer look at this. So we want to be 3,000 feet at Pisa. So if we go and have a look at the star, that wants us at 7,000 feet at the final turn, and then we can descend to 3,000 feet. So we've got 10 miles to lose 4,000 feet. And then on the final run into the airport, you can see on the charts here, look, 2,500 feet. So we drop from 3,000 at Lapmo down to 2,500 feet at Maxev, and that's where we meet the ILS beam. So we get to 2,500 before Maxev, because you must come into an ILS beam from below it to capture it. You can't capture ILS from above. So there's Lapmo over there. Look, we just got to fly around the corner to get to it. So should we have a look outside while we're flying along, and we'll see the aeroplane doing this arc around the outside of Dublin. So what I might do to save you 5 minutes of boredom is I'm going to pause the sim until we get closer to the final turn here, until there's something to actually do. It just occurred to me there is something we actually need to do. We're below 10,000 feet, the landing lights should have been on. Again, me talking, not paying attention to procedures. The professional pilots out there will be watching this and laughing. Things they do, second nature, and that they would spot from a mile out that we're missing. Obviously, in the real world, there's far more to this because you've got communication with approach, and then you've got the handoffs between centre and approach, then approach to tower. So there's communication going on, and again we are mercifully free of traffic around us. And this wouldn't be normal if you've got something like, say, intentions running in the background. Then there would be other flights in the airspace, and you'd see them on radar. You would be being told potentially a speed. So in most cases, the flight plan speeds will go out of the window because the controller will be trying to sequence you with other aircraft, and it's very rare that all aircraft are running on time, on schedule, and you know where they were supposed to be in the sky. Therefore, that's why you have the controllers sequencing everybody, and they'll be requesting speeds. They might divert you onto a vector, so to fly a given direction. We got a fuel warning there that popped up. So it's transferring fuel. Airbus does that automatically. Don't worry about it. Okay, should we go and double check? We know the wind hasn't changed, so we can go and double check and go to performance. Next phase, approach is still there, so is it still correct? Let's go and double check it. It gives us something to do. So we'll come away from here, back into the weather. 997 hectopascals, 16 degrees on the ground. No, it's dropped to 14 degrees on the ground. What about the wind? 160.05, variable 3 knots. So no, it's not. It's 0/03. Transition altitude's correct. It was 5,000 feet. So that's all looking good, and obviously the radio altimeter. So it's saying check dest data. It's just come up with the reminder, even though we were doing it. So we'll clear the message. We've checked the destination data. That's all done. So landing lights are on. So the last things in our remit, as the aircraft works its way around towards the airfield, are to be ready with the flaps as the speed comes off on final approach, be ready with the gear, and be ready to switch over to the landing system, which gives you the landing instrumentation on the screens. You've also got landing system mode on the navigation display, which gives you a really nice localizer view. So you can kind of orient yourself with the runway, which is super useful if you don't have clear visibility of the runway. So by localizer view, it shows you laterally where you are in terms of the center line of the runway. It'll make more sense when we come into finals. I'll take over manual control during finals just to show you how the instrumentation works. So we'll weave around a little bit. Okay, so we're going to get to that point very soon where we need to come down to 3,000 feet. So the airplane should start descending on its own. We're at 220 knots already, so it's literally just going to do a managed descent to 3,000 feet. And it's going, but now. It's going early, actually. That surprises me. Oh, maybe in its guidance programming it knows that when it banks its wings it will naturally have a pitch up moment, maybe, which would cause it to, because the outboard wing would generate more lift, maybe. I don't know, I'm guessing why it might do that. Okay, so we're beginning that descent, so it's going to look for flight level 030 automatically, which was the next target for pizza. Stutters today. I haven't seen that for a while. So you can see we have a minimum speed with no flaps of about 190 knots at this altitude. As we descend, the air gets thicker, obviously, but we are pretty low already. Well, that will affect the slowest speed you can go without flaps. So you'll see there's a table here of the flaps we can have at each speed. So we could go flaps 1 already. So let's do it so you get to see the symbology. So flaps 1, and it introduces this barber pole, as they call it. which just shows you your maximum speed in the current configuration. And obviously over here you're going to see the indication of the flaps and slats moving out. So if you go and look outside of the wing, you can see the leading edges have extended and the rear edge has extended slightly. So it's changing the wing shape to generate more lift, but at the expense of drag. Okay. So it wants us, we've gone through 5,000 feet, look, it's lit up saying go to standard, or sorry, go to local barometric pressure. So we need to push these back in. Now we know that the local barometric pressure is going to match, or did it? Let's have a quick look. Now this is the local, the real weather. We've not got real weather in the sim, so I'm going to leave it at 1013. Because remember, I have not got live weather on to make it simpler for you to see. So this is something you won't have to actually do if you don't have live weather on. So the other thing we can get ready is go and arm the ground spoilers again. So we're basically pre-loading the spoilers to come up en masse if we need them to. So just keep an eye on the aeroplane. We'll go and double check the radios. So 11135, 277 degrees. 11135, 278 degrees is 1 degree different. That's not going to make any difference to us. So that's what came out of its own database to configure the radio navigation kit. So we're also going to turn on the landing system so we get all this lovely symbology around the outside. And we can do that both sides. Not that one, sorry, that one. So once we've lined up, I'll rotate this around to show you the landing system there as well. So we're descending again. We're coming down towards 2,500 feet. Remember, we need to be there before MaxEv in order to be below the glide slope. Now we know we are below the glide slope because of this triangle. That is pointing towards where the glide slope is in relation to our position above the ground. We are below it. Here comes the runway centre line. Okay, so we'll put the gear down and we'll drop the flaps to the next level. Flaps 3 we can do at 185 knots, so we can go flaps 3 already. And full flaps at 177 knots, so we can go full flaps already. We are fully configured. And we are level at 2,500 feet, and here comes the glide slope. So, at this point, with us being stabilized and fully configured, we can go and click the approach mode button, and it will say Cat 3 single. Okay. So the aeroplane is now going to track the localizer and the glide slope, but it won't track the glide slope until it hits it. Also, when you are in approach mode, you can switch on both autopilots at the same time. So you've got autopilots 1 and 2, and it will say Cat 3 dual. And this will enable autoland. Autoland is dependent on the aeroplane being able to do it and the airfield being able to do it. But we're not going to do that. We're going to let me do some flying. So, airplane's fully configured. I am going to go and disable the autopilot. So just to give it a wing to waggle, we get a warning there, look, that I turned the autopilot off. We have to hit the red button on the stick to make it go away and stop doing that. So I wanted to do this to show you the symbology. So watch the diamond. If I go left of the center line, then the diamond will slide to the right. So you can see here where we are in relation to the runway. Let's reduce the range. So it's going to the right. If we turn back across the runway here, it will slide back towards the middle. Then obviously you need to make sure when it's in the middle you're going towards the runway. If you want to see the landing system, we'll rotate this round, and that just shows you your position relative to that center line. So we'll turn left again, look, to stop it moving. Also your position relative to the glide slope. We're above it at the moment, so I'll drop the nose and we'll chase it back down. And then lift the nose gently as we come onto the glide slope to kind of try to balance it so the diamond stays somewhere near the middle. Yeah, if we go too low, watch the diamond. It's going above the yellow line. So we want to keep it on the yellow line. Also, once you get close to the runway, you can see the PAPI lights. So the auto throttle is on all the time, by the way, here.
1,000.
So it's managing my airspeed expertly, as long as I don't maneuver too hard. So we got nose up a little bit, look. So the PAPI lights are showing now. We've got 3 reds and 1 white, which means we're too low. It's just gone to 2 and 2, which is perfect, which should agree with the ILS. If you go too high, you'll get 3 whites and 1 red, or all whites and no reds. So I'm ready with my hand on the throttles. As soon as I pull the throttles all the way back, the auto throttle will shut off. So we're too low. And we're back on the glide slope. So I'm waving around a little bit on purpose to show you.
400.
So just small movements, keep it on the center line, keep it
300.
on the descent profile. It's tempting to over control, try to resist
200.
against it. Quite often you'll see people come in a little bit low on purpose, which gives them time to
Minimum 100.
to pull the throttles. You heard the minimum call out there at 100 feet, so we make our decision.
50. 40.
There we go. Oh,
30.
throttles to idle.
20. Retard. 10. Retard. 5. Retard. Retard.
We're floating a little
Retard. Retard.
bit, and we're down. So then we can go to reversers on the engines, which aren't very powerful, has to be said. So we're going to go. Oh, it may have just been a control configuration actually. But the reversers did kick in when I forced them to. So then we can remove the spoilers and the flaps. The spoilers come up automatically on weight on wheels if you are going with reversers. And there we go. So when you come off the runway, you're going to turn off the landing lights so you don't blind people. The strobes can go back to auto, so they should be switching off on their own. And then it's just a case of taxiing round to the gate. So hopefully you enjoyed that. We've covered an awful lot of different things, and obviously you build up your knowledge bit by bit, and there's whole chunks of things I don't know about yet. But every time I take an aeroplane up, I learn a bit more. Or every time I watch one of the professionals doing it, I take all sorts of things away. You know, that they maybe have mentioned in passing, that they don't think of as important, but I've never seen before. Or, you know, or never heard anybody talk about. So there's always more and more to learn. A lot of it, or a lot of my learning now, comes in terms of procedures and air law and things like that, and responding appropriately to air traffic services. And just the procedural side of it is just a mountain to climb when you're first starting out. Because obviously flying an aeroplane is your first concern, and then when you get good at that, you're thinking, okay, I want a more complicated aeroplane. So essentially, when you're flying the Airbus, you're not really flying it. You're configuring the computer that flies the aeroplane. But yeah, there's always more and more to learn, and it's absolutely fascinating. Okay, so we're going to roll up towards the gates, and then we'll talk a little bit about shutting the aeroplane down and some of your options. So while we're taxiing, we could be turning the APU back on. So if we were going to anticipate that there wouldn't be a external power supply at the gate, then we could have our own secondary source of power ready if we have the fuel for it. So the APU, again, the APU up and running on the taxi in, so when we close the engines off, we won't be relying purely on batteries for power. We'll have the APU generating power for us, ready to go. So we should have the taxi light on, by the way, I forgot to do that. Put the head tracking on as well to make it a bit easier to see around corners. Alt 7, there we go. So head tracking has been a huge advantage to me with the simulator. It frees your hands up, like when you're multitasking like that and needing to click on something or handle both of your controllers while also looking in different directions. It gives you a lot more fidelity in terms of what you can achieve in one go. So obviously in the real world we would have stopped there and requested clearance to get across this runway. So like I said, there's levels and levels and levels of the procedures, of the things you do, the way you behave, just like driving a car on the road. Being able to sit in the seat and operate the controls is not the same as safely driving through a busy town. So we go and park on the end of the building here. Yeah, we're going next to the... That was a dash of some description. So park and brake on. So as I mentioned, we've got the APU up and running, and we can test that by looking in the APU settings, and you can see the power's ready for us if we need it. So without going to external power, which we could, we can go to APU. So when we shut the engines down, so watch the switches here, we're going to pull both engines up. So power will bus transfer automatically over to the APU as the engines die. You may see a flicker. The more accurate aeroplanes, you sometimes see a flicker in the screens as it happens. It may be the clunk of a relay. It really varies from plane to plane how much they've got simulated. Okay, so we're going to turn off our taxi lights, beacon light off because the engines are off. Strobe light can go to off from auto. The no smoking sign can go off. We never put the seatbelt sign back on. Again, procedural things. My constant failing. So turn the fuel pumps off for the engines. They're boost pumps really. We can go and switch off the inertial navigation system. We can go and turn the cruise supply back off. And we're pretty much there. So if you did want to use external power, what you can do is come over to the tablet. So looking on the ground setting here, the ground thing has got a click spot that goes through it that puts this sunshade in. Don't know if you ever noticed that. So you can go and toggle the GPU in here. So that has plugged the GPU into the aeroplane. As soon as you have done that, you can then use external power again overhead. So external power is on, so we don't need the APU anymore. So again, it will bus transfer over automatically. So we switch the APU off. So you can watch that slowing down over here. Look, it stopped generating electric, but we still got power. That's the external power doing that now. Obviously, once we are happy with that, we can turn off the external power. A lot of the airplane will go dark. We're now on batteries only, and then if we turn the batteries off, we're cold and dark, as they call it. Okay, and then we can remove the GPU as well. So there we go. That was a basic kind of run through of flying from A to B in the Airbus A320 version 2 from IndyBuilds that comes with Flight Simulator 2024. We covered an awful lot in this session. So there were a few little tiny procedural mistakes here and there where I was too busy talking and not thinking things through properly. So don't use this as something to hang me by, please. But hopefully you get a lot out of this if you're just starting out, so you can go through and methodically figure out what I was doing. And remember, I'm going to link in the notes of the video and in a pinned comment the functional procedure I've written up that goes through the essentials. So it's by no means a full pilot operating handbook procedure. It's not going to tell you how everything works, it's just going to tell you what you have to do and where to look to do it. And obviously you could extend it enormously with all of the tests that a real crew would do to make sure systems are working correctly. And in different airplanes in the simulator, different versions of the Airbus, for example, like from Phoenix or Flight Sim Labs or whoever, they all simulate the systems at different depths, and some of them are better than others, or more accurate than others. Better is the wrong word to use. Some of them are a higher fidelity, more study level. Study level is a strange term that people throw around. I guess none of the planes in Flight Simulator are really study level. You couldn't use them well, you could use them for familiarity, but the real simulators that the crews practice on cost millions. They don't cost $100 from the Microsoft store. So anyway, yes, I'll link my procedural notes, which are just a shortcut series of steps to go through to get yourself up and running in the aeroplane quickly and easily, and so to hopefully mean you don't forget things as well, unlike me where I was talking all the way through it and forgot all sorts of things. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll catch you again soon. Take care.